Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Heavy Hitters. I am your host, Joey Lakhman, and we are here for episode 5. Today, we are going to be talking about UFC 264, which headlines Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 3. Today, I am joined by my friends Christian Gardner and Michael Daly. So, before we get started, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Joey. I'm just glad to be back right here on this show. As long as Michael's Milwaukee Bucks pick up the slack, but we're here to talk about fighting.
Definitely. Giannis has got to get that chip for us. But that's not what we're here for. We're here for some good old-fashioned fight talk, if you will. So first up, let's start off with one of my favorite fighters, and honestly, a lot of people's favorite fighters, Sugar Sean O'Malley. He is back in the lineup. He is going against Kris Moutinho, who is a newcomer to the UFC, but not to MMA. So Sugar Sean is looking to follow up a very impressive performance in his last bout. He had a third round TKO of Thomas Almeida, and he looked spectacular in that fight. And that's what we want to see. Everyone thinks this guy is going to be the next big star, possibly the next Conor McGregor, and take over the UFC. So those are the types of performances that we need to see from him. So obviously he would love to get another victory to continue ascending through the rankings. But Kris Moutinho is a new face in the UFC, and he's got a record of 9-4 in the MMA. And his last fight, he got a third round submission of someone named Andrew Salas. So he doesn't look too shabby. So what are the keys to the victory, do you guys think, for both of these guys? We'll start with you, Christian.
Yeah, this is just such a tough first bout to go into the UFC with. I mean, this is one of the darlings of the entire league right now, and Sugar Sean. I mean, he's so much fun to watch, and we know what he can do with his hands. I mean, the way that he can sleep somebody, his counterattacks are amazing. But for Kris Moutinho here, in his history, he has a good ground game, and so he has to go down to that, taking this on short notice. It's going to be tough. But if he can get him down to the ground, he has a couple wins getting the arm of some other fighters. If he can do that, surprise the whole world, then tonight might be his night. But who knows? I think for Sugar Sean, for him, we know how good he is on his feet, and he wants to keep that fight there.
I expect this to be a stand-up affair. I would say for Sugar Sean, I think the most important thing is learning from the Thomas Almeida fight. And by that, I mean, if you have your opponent hurt, do not admire your work. And I think he learned his lesson there. But part of the reason why back in March he admired his work is because of his merch line, because he has a shirt out talking about something with a left hook. He landed a left hook and wanted to just get that still image. But look, in MMA, when you hurt your opponent, you have to go in for the kill. I think this time around, if he does that with Kris Moutinho, you will not see Sugar Sean O'Malley standing and posing in front of his opponent. He will drop down and he will get the finish like he did against Thomas Almeida in the third round, even though he should have had that finish in the first. For Kris Moutinho, the game plan that I think he should do is something different than what he's saying. Right now, he's saying that he's going to stand up and trying to knock out Sugar Sean O'Malley. He said that he wants the fight of the night. Could that happen? It very well could. Do I think it will? No, because Kris Moutinho, talk about a jump up in the level of opponents. That's a steep climb to make against Sugar Sean O'Malley. But I think Moutinho, you guys touched on it perfectly. You said he needs to go to the ground. He does. I don't think he will, though. I think he's going to stand, and it could be a problem for him. But I think this is going to be an action-packed fight for as long as it lasts.
Well, I agree with both of you guys with most of the things that you guys said, Michael. I mean, if he stands up with Sugar Sean, I mean, I think we both know that that's pretty much a recipe for disaster, even though it would be pretty entertaining and, it would be fun to watch. But Christian, I have to agree with you. I think if he wants to succeed in this fight or even do well or put up a good fight, this is going to have to go to the ground, and he's going to have to work on his grappling and submissions in order to take out Sugar Sean. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't. I think Sugar Sean might just be a little too good for this guy, but we'll see. I haven't seen much of Moutinho before. I can only go off of some highlights on YouTube. So I'm definitely looking forward to this fight. Obviously, you guys can probably guess who I'm going to pick to win this fight, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. Let's start with you, Michael. Who do you think is going to win this fight and how?
My pick is Sugar Sean O'Malley. I'm going second round TKO. I think his success in the Thomas Almeida fight, it will translate to this fight because he's angry after Louis Smolka pulled out. I think he wanted that fight because Smolka, although he's unranked, he's a solid opponent at 135 pounds. Now, you're taking somebody who was a star in LFA. Don't get me wrong. Kris Moutinho was a solid fighter in that promotion, but he's getting called up to the big leagues here. And I think he's getting fed to the wolves. And Sugar Sean O'Malley, he's going to make the most of this moment. The reason why, everyone tabbed him to be the next quote-unquote Conor McGregor, right? Even though I don't think that's a fair assessment because it's so hard to live up to. But I do think after Saturday night, his stock will rise.
Michael, I would love to be on this show, just give hot takes all the time and just be like Kris Moutinho right into the UFC. But I mean, we all know how this is going to go. We all know how this is going to go. Sugar Sean is going to knock him out. And I don't know, you said second round? I'll go third, give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll let him see the final round in this fight. But there's no way on short notice that a fighter that for the best is to surprise someone to get the submission and get the win. I just don't see that happening. Especially if he's saying he wants to stand up. This is not the guy you want to stand in with. This is just not the guy. So it's unfortunate that this has to be his first UFC bout. This is the first taste that we're all getting of Moutinho, and it's not going to be the best look for him. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to see the man sleeping on the canvas. And Sugar Sean is going to continue to rise, like you said, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with both of you. Like you said, Christian, as much as I want to be up here and be like, Kris Moutinho, he's going to get it done. He's going to shock the world. It's just not going to happen. We all know that. And just for the sake of being different, I'm going to go first round knockout for Sugar Sean O'Malley. Definitely not impossible at all by any means. But yeah, I think we'll go with that. So we all got Sugar Sean knocking out Kris Moutinho. Okay, so normally we would move on to the co-main event right away, but when Greg Hardy is on the card, I don't know. I find it hard not to talk about it. So let's do that real quick. So we also have on this card Tai Tuivasa versus Greg Hardy in a UFC bout, heavyweight bout, excuse me. So both of these guys are extremely powerful hitters, and they came out with a bang into the UFC. Tai Tuivasa came out 9-0, but since then he has lost 3 straight, unfortunately. And Greg Hardy, has had a bit of a mixed MMA career after retiring from football and moving on to MMA career. He's 7-3 right now. They've seen his opponents have shown how to expose him in a way. He definitely has some flaws to his game, and both of these guys are looking to put up a good performance to shut up the haters, if you will. So what do you think are the keys to the win for both of these guys?
I think this is very wild to me because I very much remember Greg Hardy, the football player, because I think his last stint was with my Dallas Cowboys. But seeing him in the Octagon is going to be very strange, but he's made himself into a fighter. So he likes to stand up, but for taking on Tuivasa, this is a guy that's getting taught by Mark Hunt. That was one of my favorite fighters of a couple years ago, and that is a lethal striker. So I think for him he's going to have to use that size. He's really big, Greg Hardy. If he can get him to the ground, put that weight on top of him, maybe he can make something happen. But that's not the kind of fighter that Greg Hardy is, and I don't see that changing that much for him on Saturday.
Greg Hardy is at a point where his athleticism got him to the UFC. There's no doubt about it. He's a solid fighter, a very tough guy in his own right. But the thing we have to remember, guys, there are levels to MMA. There are levels to the UFC. And even though Tai Tuivasa may not be the greatest heavyweight in the world, he has a solid mixed martial arts background. And he's not someone that is going just off of pure athleticism and strength, because Tai Tuivasa has been there before and he's done that. He's seen guys just like Greg Hardy. I think for Greg Hardy, a lot of people, it was kind of a smokescreen when he went in there in November 2019 and competed with Alexander Volkov. A lot of people thought he was just going to get starched and disposed of really quickly. He lost the fight, but it was competitive. The reason why I think it was a smokescreen is because I think it was a false sense of confidence. After that, he beat Yorgan De Castro, then Maurice Green, but then he lost to Marcin Tybura. Marcin Tybura, to me, is in the same ballpark as someone like Tai Tuivasa. If you can't beat Marcin Tybura, I think you were going to have a tough time with Tai Tuivasa, just because Tuivasa is better than you are on the ground, and also in the heavyweight division, one punch can finish it all. So if Greg Hardy's going to win, he's going to have to crack Tuivasa. I just don't see it happening, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, neither do I. I mean, I think both of these guys are gonna go into this fight with pretty straightforward game plans. I don't think either of them wanna take it to the ground, even though it might be a useful strategy, especially for Greg Hardy. But both of these guys are just gonna be looking to crack each other and land that one knockout blow. And Greg Hardy, in his past fights, we've seen that he does struggle with endurance and he has some stamina issues. And Tai Tuivasa is actually a very fast heavyweight. And I think that's going to cause a lot of problems for Greg Hardy. I think he's going to keep moving around. And I think Greg Hardy is going to get gassed relatively early in this fight. And I think that's going to be his ultimate downfall in this. So with that being said, who do you guys pick to win this fight and how? Let's start with you, Michael.
My pick is Tai Tuivasa. I think this is going to be, I'm going to go again, a second round TKO. I just think Tuivasa, his skill set and his experience is too much. It wouldn't shock me if Greg Hardy has a chance to clip Tai Tuivasa, but I think the problem for Greg Hardy is I think he's going to empty out his gas tank a little bit too soon, and I think his endurance is going to wear on him, and that's what's going to favor Tai Tuivasa. I just think Tuivasa, when it comes to striking and power in the heavyweight division, he gets overlooked a lot. But look what he did to Stefan Struve in October. He has a ton of power that he possesses. Christian said it so eloquently. Comes from the school of Mark Hunt. That's not someone you want to play around with. And I know Greg Hardy's a tough guy, but it's just the experience level. I don't think you can go against Tai Tuivasa in this go-around, Christian.
Michael, we're cut from the same cloth, man. Because I'm still not sold on Greg Hardy. I know he's been on this journey for so long, but the skill that Tuivasa has, I think Greg Hardy, he will come out with his kill shot in the first round. He'll throw and throw and throw. And if he connects, then maybe he'll surprise everyone. But for me, it's Tuivasa. And if this goes full three, there's no question to me that Tuivasa doesn't get his arm raised.
Yeah, to your point, Christian, I don't think anybody is particularly sold on Greg Hardy, the heavyweight contender, if you will. And I just don't see any scenario where, unless he lands a good shot early on in the fight, which obviously with heavyweights it can happen. That's the type of fighters they are. But aside from that, I just don't see any chance for him to succeed against Tuivasa. I'm gonna go with a third round KO because I think that in the third round, if it does get there, he's gonna be gassed. He's gonna be dead tired, and Tuivasa is gonna have that endurance and that energy to keep it going and ultimately finish off the fight in the third round. So those are our picks. Let's move on to the co-main event. Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, I personally am probably the most excited for this fight out of all of them. I just feel like it's a great matchup. I feel like whoever wins this fight is really gonna. This fight is gonna have serious repercussions in the division. I think whoever wins is gonna get another title shot, and I think that would be great for either of them. Obviously, Gilbert Burns had an absolutely heartbreaking loss in February to the champ Kamaru Usman, and now he's looking to get back into the win column against Wonderboy. Now Burns had 6 straight wins prior to that loss to Usman, and he looked absolutely incredible and unstoppable at times. But similarly, Thompson has had some pretty good wins. He's had back-to-back wins, one of them against Vicente Luque, which earned him a performance of the night bonus in that fight. And honestly, both of these guys are looking really good going into this fight. I mean, these two guys, you love both of them. They just have such great personalities. And honestly, you don't want to see either of them lose, particularly, but one of them has to. So, what do you think each of these guys has to do to get their hand raised? Let's start with you, Christian.
Well, for me, Wonderboy, he was one of those stars that really got me into the sport, and just his kicks that he can do, he is electrifying. So his length that he has with him has been such a beneficiary for his entire career. And so he's going to try to continue to do that. But this is an insane fighter that Burns is, and the submissions that he can bring, his grappling, that will absolutely dominate the fight to me. But Wonderboy, if he can continue to keep that distance like he has through and through his career and see some of these crazy kicks that he's been able to pull off, then that might be the way for him. But we've seen him battle through and through and escape a lot of different grappling techniques, and he can be right there too. So I think this is going to be a phenomenal fight through and through, but who knows who wins this one.
I really think this fight is much more of a pick'em than people are giving it credit for. A lot of people are really just giving it to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and I understand why, because of the striking element to it. Most people think Gilbert Burns is going to try to take Stephen Wonderboy Thompson down. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, because Wonderboy is coming into this fight, and he said it on the UFC Embedded that he has to be wary of Burns' jiu-jitsu. He'll never be on Burns' level in terms of grappling. But Burns also will never be on Wonderboy's level in terms of striking. So there's a parallel to this. And I think this is a classic example of a karate style fighter and a jiu-jitsu style fighter. Where will it go? I don't know. I think this fight, because every fight starts standing up, I think it's going to stay on the feet for most of it, because I think Burns will have trouble taking down Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, if I'm looking at the keys to the fight, I think Wonderboy, I'm really interested to see how he will do fighting on his back foot and at a distance. Because in the Jeff Neal fight, if you guys remember, he hurt his leg, and that kind of hampered his performance. Although he won and he cruised to a unanimous decision victory, I just think that there were a few moments where if Jeff Neal really wanted to push on the gas, he could have, but he didn't, or at least he wasn't able to. Gilbert Burns, I think Burns has to take the center of the octagon and really put it on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Not that it's an easy thing to do, because if you come inside on Stephen Thompson, you will get hurt. But I think Burns has the power to kind of mitigate those problems.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you. I think the keys to the fight for Burns, he's got to take control of this fight early. He's got to push the pace. He's got to be aggressive. And I mean, we saw early on in the fight back in February, he was able to land some pretty good shots on Usman, and he rocked him a little bit in those first couple of rounds, obviously to no avail, as he ended up losing that fight, but he's got some serious power as well. And I think that his overall aggression, along with his superb wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I think it might be a little too much for Wonderboy to handle. But obviously for Wonderboy, he's gonna do what he always does. He's gonna try to stay at range, use those extraordinary kicks, and counter Burns to try and kind of dissect him. But ultimately, what I think is gonna be the downfall for Thompson is we all know that he has this very traditional karate type stance with his hands down low. And I think ultimately that's gonna cost him because it's gonna open up a lot of opportunities for Burns, and he might land a couple of good shots just because Thompson likes to have his hands down most of the time. But with that being said, who do you guys think is gonna win? Who's gonna emerge victorious in this one? We'll start with you, Michael.
My pick is Gilbert Burns. I would love to pick Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one of my favorite fighters of all time, but Gilbert Burns has the power to put anyone away. He dropped Kamaru Usman. I think he got a little bit overzealous in the first round when he did that, and I think that gave enough time for Usman to kind of catch his breath while Burns was losing his breath by emptying out his cardio. I think this time around, Burns will be much more measured, and I honestly think Burns is going to catch Stephen Wonderboy Thompson moving backwards. I think that's what's going to happen because you said it, Joe. Always fights with his hands down, and he kind of moves his head, works with head movement. It worked with Jeff Neal, worked with Vicente Luque. And yes, those two are teammates of Gilbert Burns, but third time's the charm. And Burns was in Luque's corner at UFC 244. I think he has learned a lot from studying Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I think this will be a split decision victory in favor of Gilbert Burns.
Michael, how do we keep doing this? We need to stop doing this because we are on the same page again. You brought up a great point of being in the corner of Vicente Luque. When you know a fighter that well, you know exactly how to dominate them. And the points that you guys have brought up, keeping his hands down might be the end of it for him. And I'm going with Gilbert Burns. I think what he can do, he has the power. Not a lot of people have rocked Kamaru Usman the way that he did. And Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, even though how much I love him for bringing me into the sport a lot, I don't think the Wonderboy shows out this Saturday. And I think Gilbert Burns shows why he can get another shot against Kamaru Usman. And I'm going to go with, after getting that shot, like you said, Michael, I'm going to go, he takes him to the ground and gets some type of armbar submission. I think for him, it's going to be a phenomenal night as he raises that stock up.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you guys. My heart wants Wonderboy to win, but my brain is just telling me it's not gonna happen, unfortunately, for him this Saturday. So I'm gonna go with Gilbert Burns as well. I don't think it's gonna go the distance like you think, Michael. I think there will be a stoppage, but to Christian's point, I honestly don't know if it will be like a TKO or a submission because I think both of them are equally possible in a sense. So I'm just gonna say that it's gonna get stopped, and I think it's gonna be towards the latter end of the fight, possibly the third round around there. So now that we're done with that, let's move on to why we're all here. Let's face it. Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier, numero tres. So we're finishing off the trilogy here. Each guy has won a fight. Each guy has knocked the other one out. Pretty convincingly, I might add, in both fights, respectively. Poirier is probably a lot more motivated to win this fight because he wants a shot at the title. He has never had the real title in his hands, whereas McGregor has been there, done that. And, you might have to question, if McGregor really has that hunger to fight and to be the champ again. So in the last fight, he kind of committed a little bit too much to boxing. And although McGregor had some success early on in the fight, Poirier adjusted and beat up that leg of McGregor's. And ultimately, that was what led to the knockout because McGregor could just not get out of the way of those punches. So, I think we know what both of these guys are going to do. McGregor is going to make some adjustments, just like he always does when he fights someone a second or third time in this case. And Poirier, I feel like he's going to do a little bit of the same stuff. But with that being said, what do these guys have to do to get the win? We'll start with you, Christian.
I think looking back at that fight, was that our first show? One of our first shows, at least. Just seeing the way that McGregor got chopped down in that one, for me, it's a little bit of fatigue of not being in the octagon, of not being focused on the UFC. And I think when you have a full year of dedicating yourself to this type of fight game, it will be completely different. And like you said, Joe, he is a completely different fighter when you see him another time. But for Dustin Poirier, what he was able to do, that was not no fluke. This is a phenomenal fighter, and it'll show again on Saturday night. So I don't know if we're going to see any type of war like that, but these are two very technically sound fighters, and it's going to still stay standing up for me and see what blows they can throw. If Dustin Poirier wants to go into that grapple game, that'll be interesting. But for me, it's going to be on the feet, going back and forth, the counter strikes. We all know what that left hand of McGregor can do. We'll see what happens on Saturday.
This is going to be a make or break fight for both guys, particularly Conor McGregor. The reason why I say particularly for McGregor is because since he became the double champion at UFC 205, he's been expected to be here. And I think his fall off, not too many people anticipated it. Part of it's because he went to boxing. Maybe he had his eyes set on other things like business ventures. Who knows? But he did fall off. If he loses this fight, it's over in terms of getting back to a championship fight. I still think he will have a career, but in terms of being the champion, especially at 155 pounds, I think the curtains are closed there. For Poirier, you could say the same thing because the UFC is not always a meritocracy. Conor McGregor, look, he could lose this fight, and one day he might fight for the title again. But if Poirier loses this one, I think it's a wrap. So he needs this one, maybe just as much as Conor, but I don't think it's as much on that same level because he caught a lot of people by surprise with how his career turned out, especially within the last 4 to 5 years. But with that being said, though, I think the first round will be how the fight plays out. If Poirier is able to survive, it favors him. If Conor is able to put a ton of damage on Poirier, I think the fight leans toward Conor in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, that was another point, a great point Christian made. He's been in and out of the UFC for a while, and now he's actually going to have a full year of kind of sort of, training for the UFC and putting in the work for an actual MMA fight, which will definitely benefit McGregor. I mean, you look at everything here, and let's be honest, I feel like everything kind of points towards McGregor in this final fight of the trilogy. But ultimately, what it comes down to for me is I really just think Poirier wants it more. And I feel like when somebody wants it that bad, I don't know if there's much that you can do to take it away from him. I mean, at the end of the day, Poirier is the guy I'm going to be rooting for, just because I want to see him succeed finally in the division with a title shot. But yeah, I mean, who knows what will happen. I personally think that this fight is going to go the distance regardless. I think it might be a pretty good fight. I don't know about a war, but definitely very, very entertaining. So with that being said, who do you guys pick for this fight and how? We'll start with you, Christian, again.
I have no real clue for this one, honestly, because if we're just playing storylines, if we're saying the UFC's rigged, then they're going to give it to Conor McGregor. But like you said, Joe, Dustin Poirier wants this so bad. Where is Conor McGregor at? I don't know. But for my heart, because Conor McGregor, one of those fighters that there's no secret uplifted the UFC into making it the spectacle that it is now. You want to give it to him. So I'm just going to go with that way. I'm going to go with McGregor, and I'm going all the way through, all 5.
I'm going to make this quick because I know we're running low on time. Poirier, to me, I think he's going to get it done. The reason why, everyone now is favoring Poirier. It seems like a little bit closer to the fight. People have been leaning towards Conor. I'm thinking Poirier allows this to go to the distance. He survives the storm in the first round. I think he gets hurt at a certain point in time, but I think he pulls it together, uses his striking, and I even think he finds a way to take down Conor McGregor, and that's why I think Dustin Poirier will win.
I agree with you, Michael, completely. A lot of people are leaning towards Poirier now, or towards McGregor, sorry. And I just think Poirier is going to come out on top. I think it's going to be a decision, and I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining fight. So with that being said, everyone, that is all we have time for today. So I wanted to thank Michael and Christian for joining me once again. I hope you all are tuned in to these spectacular fights on Saturday night. I will see you next time. But until then, stay safe, everyone.